There are about a million different topics that we could start, but let's start with the news piece that we kind of been talking about during the show today, which is the Will Lutz injury. Nick, what's going on, man? Thank you for joining us. Let's start here. Was this Will Lutz injury a recent development, or is it akin to something like the Mike Thomas situation where they've been monitoring it and it finally just became untenable?
I like that we're starting with Lutz instead of Mike Thomas because it is a big deal for this team to lose their kicker. And, you know, Sean Payton over the years really hasn't had too many kickers that he trusts, and Lutz has been one of the outlier guys, and he's, you know, one of the best in the business. Last year he missed maybe, 4 field goals. I think 3 of them were because the laces were spotted wrong, and then Thomas Morstead, after the season, actually got LASIK surgery because he was having trouble seeing things, and I think that was part of the issue with the operation. But, yeah, this is something that he's been dealing with. He started camp on the NFI list, non-football injury list. He had that core muscle. I think it was a sports hernia, and he tried to come back last week. He kicked one day in practice. It looked good. Then Saturday he was out there doing some work, and he had to leave early. Saw him leave with the trainer, and they shut it down and got the surgery. And, you know, it was just something they wanted to do right away instead of trying to rehab it, because he is a very significant part of this team. And, you know, I think that was amplified yesterday by the guys they brought in to work out. You know, they signed a guy that, you know, has a 70-some% career field goal percentage. The other guy that they tried out kicked 1 year in the league, and it was like 67%. So, I mean, there just aren't a lot of great kickers out there. And maybe it's something where you go through the preseason, teams with 2 teams end up cutting somebody, and there's a change before the season because, you know, the top 60 or so kickers in the league right now are on other teams, and you're kind of at the bottom, you know, of that kicker carousel. So, you know, they signed Mayer. I'm not sure, though, that's necessarily going to be the guy that you go into the season with, but he will get the first crack at it.
Nick, as you know, OTB is a special teams War Daddy show. We talk about all 3 phases here on this show, and I'm a little bit worried, right? New punter, new kicker, you lose War Daddies and Hardy and Robinson, guys that were staples on your special teams. They were core guys, all 4, and that's really been a strength for the Saints. And now you kind of hit reset and you start over.
Yeah, look, that Justin Hardy loss is a big deal. I mean, they got away last year with you know, Morstead, he was hurt, he was punting, and it just wasn't what it used to be. And the distance, the hang time, all that stuff was lesser than it used to be. And having Hardy and JT Gray allowed you to still rank in the top of the league in that punt. And, you know, losing him is one of those low-key losses that I think is going to be a big deal. And I'm not sure, you know, I watch the Gunners every day because that's the easiest way to notice who's going to make the team. I mean, special teams, these guys further down the roster, you see Bryce Thompson, the safety they brought in, UDFA, he makes a play. Deuce Wallace makes a play there. And those are guys that get put on your radar. Paulson Adebo's look good as a gunner too, but I don't know if there's that guy yet that stands out quite the same way as Hardy did. Last year, Marquez Callaway was somebody that, you know, immediately looked great as a gunner. He didn't end up in that role during the season because, you know, they had the other 2 guys. But, you know, right away it's like, oh, he has a good chance of making the team. So that's a big thing that they got to try to figure out. You know, I do think that Blake Gillikin, I think he's got a bigger leg than Morstead. You know, he's hung some punts above 5 seconds, and the hang time on a few of these have been just, you know, absolutely outrageous. That's like an all-pro time. You know, the question that we'll see once it gets into game situations is situational punting good, directional. Can he, you know, put it inside the 20, inside the 10? You know, right now they're just kind of out there booming them and hanging them, and it's, you know, who has the biggest leg. And his consistency, though, is something that's really, really stands out. Like, you know, he'll punt from the 20 and 4 punts in a row. The hang time is exactly the same or within a couple tenths of a second. So his mechanics are just so repeatable, and I think that's going to lend itself to him being a very consistent punter. But, I mean, it's something that we do have to see in games.
Nick Underhill at Nick_Underhill on Twitter. Nuance.football is tight. Trust me when I say you want to sign up. More on that later. Nick, let's get to the Mike Thomas elephant in the room. It is clear, as your article states from this morning, it is clear the relationship is there's problems right now. It is a strained relationship. Like you said, even if you don't read the media reports, which are also legitimate, like even if you don't read those about unanswered calls, all this other stuff, the facts of the matter are he was suspended last week. Coach Payton has come out publicly. Mike Thomas has subtweeted basically publicly and liked all these tweets. The relationship is strained. My question is twofold. If you were going to trade Mike Thomas or something like that, what are the barriers? And maybe more importantly, has it gotten bad enough where the Saints would be willing to swallow these barriers?
I mean, the second part of it's really the whole crux of the whole situation. If they feel like they need him out of the building, it is something where you swallow the barriers, and they have done that in the past. You know, they got rid of Junior Gillette right after they signed him, and that situation was a little bit different. There was, you know, an off-field incident that kind of forced their hand on that. But the Jimmy Graham situation, they signed him, decided he wasn't the right guy for the team. There were some problems there, and, you know, they ate the dead cap money. So, you know, this is one of those things where you look at it and you say, okay, Mike Thomas, if they trade him, there's $32 million in dead money. There's no way they're going to trade him, because that's how we all look at these things, and that's how 31 other teams in the NFL operate. The Saints aren't a team, though, that, and we should all know this by now, they don't make decisions based on the salary cap, and if something has to happen, it'll happen, and they'll manipulate it, and they'll figure out a way to make it work. So it is a significant barrier, and you would have to really just want him out of the building and decide that, you know what, this guy can't come back in here. There's been too many incidents. For the sake of the team, we got to take this hit and forget about the money. And those are the kind of decisions the Saints make. And on one hand, yeah, it's financially irresponsible, but on the other hand, if you have to do that to protect your team, those are hard decisions that got to be made. So it can be something that deserves a lot of criticism, but, you know, on the other side of it, sometimes you got to admit it's necessary and just kind of take the hit. So if they were to trade him, $32 million hit, the way it breaks down, it'd be like $9 million and some change this year would go on the cap. So they'd actually save about $1 million in this season by getting rid of him. And then next year, though, it would be a $22 million hit in some change. So that's a sizable amount of money to not have a player on your team, but the cap will go up. The new money from the TV deals will kick in, and God willing, there'll be fans in the stands, and they won't have to, you know, have this crunch again in another year. But, you know, it's tough, and that is a huge hit. And look, this is also a team that doesn't have a lot of wide receivers, but they also want to win right now. And trading, you know, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL isn't something that's going to help with that goal. But, you know, if it's to the point where fences can't be mended, there's too much has happened, it's a distraction, you know, it is a hard decision that I could see happening. I'm not predicting it's happening. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I think it's something that people need to realistically look at. Everything that's happened, you know, the fight with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson last year, the suspension stemming from that, you know, not going to your doctor's appointments this offseason, and, you know, as Jeff Duncan reported, not answering your phone for 3 months. Sean Payton saying in public that it should have been handled differently during his pre-training camp press conference. Mike Thomas's tweet saying that the Saints hammered his reputation and it was unfair, and he's keeping his mouth shut to protect them. All these things without the commentary around them, it paints the picture of a very tenuous situation. And, you know, I think all outcomes right now are something that people got to be looking at and got to be prepared, and they shouldn't be shocked if, you know, it ends up in a trade, or, you know, it's quite possible that there isn't a trade partner. And I've been saying this since last year. I mean, if you get him back on the building, he starts playing well, they're winning games, he's getting his yards, it's possible that can be the cure-all. But, I mean, it's just so hard to predict that right now because he's not playing. He's injured. He's not on the field. So all this situation is doing is festering and getting worse.
Yeah.
And it just feels like that's so far off. But, you know, if they can hold tight until then, maybe you fix the situation. But, you know, it's hard to predict anything right now because it is just so tenuous, and you never know. Like, you know, is there going to be a tweet today that goes out? Does he get mad and fire something off and blows it up? I mean, it's a very tenuous situation.
All right, so Nick, let me ask you this, because we know how contracts work. If you have an all-season injury and you don't do the things that you're supposed to be doing by going to the doctor appointments, by checking in with the Saints, is there something in his contract where they could possibly do something? Just because, I mean, insubordination would kind of come up when you don't go to your doctor's appointments and you don't follow up with the team and you turn your phone off and you screen calls. That has to be something in your contract where you can possibly change, you know, some of this outcome.
I mean, that'd be a tough one to go through. And, I mean, look, he still has – I mean, you're right. There are things, and there's contract detrimental and all the stuff that you could go through. That would be a really messy situation, though, where you know, I think it would end in a ton of arbitration, and you'd eventually maybe get some cap money back, but it'd be way down the road. And you know, people start looking at you around the league, and you know, players talk, you know that, and you don't want to be the team that's like kind of going after players. And you know, through that situation, you're just getting rid of them, and you aren't getting anything back. I think Mike Thomas still has a lot of value. I think it's lesser than it was a month ago before he was the guy that wasn't answering his phone and all this stuff. And an injured player that's not cooperating with his team, that's a guy that's going to take a hit on his value. And look, I think if they're going to trade him, I think it's better to do it ASAP, because if that next thing happens, then your leverage and your bargaining position becomes even lesser. Like the Antonio Brown situation is more and more stuff continue going on in Pittsburgh. His value just dropped and dropped and dropped and dropped until it was, basically nothing. And you don't want this situation to end up in that spot. And if you were to trade him right now, the way his contract is set up, you can go 3 years. He'd be $11 million average annual value, $1 million for the trading team this year. And then you just cut him in the last year of the contract before the $18 million comes due, and you get him for the same price as Nelson Aguilar. So,
wow.
I mean, there's a lot of value for other teams. It's just do you want to deal with the headache? Do you want to deal with the injury? But, going after the money, it is something that I think you could try, but I don't know if that would be the most productive outcome right now.
You just put it into some stark perspective there, Nick. How do we end up here? Okay, and let's get to maybe some happier news here. Nick, is what's all this talk about Ian Book kind of flashing a little bit? Not necessarily that he'll I don't know that he has a role to play this year or anything, but it seems like Book's kind of acquitting himself well this camp.
Yeah, I'll go out on a limb here and say that I think a lot of the stuff that was said before the draft, after the draft pick, was maybe a little bit off, just as far as, him being a guy that can't play in the NFL. I hope he performs as well as he is in training camp and games. It could be a situation where he really knows who he's up against and has picked up on some tendencies. The depth at cornerback is pretty soft. And, by the time you get down to the third team, fourth team, maybe he's just throwing at guys that aren't very good at covering. But it looks like he's doing a really good job. He's steady in the pocket. He's accurate. And he's making some heady plays. He had one yesterday, kind of avoided the rush, hit Juwan Johnson on the sideline, but the real gem, and I would put this as one of the top 2 or 3 throws of training camp so far. They were in a red zone drill. He pump fakes to Alvin on the sideline. Safety bites down and just hits the receiver over the top for a touchdown. And it's just very, very heady plays and stuff that, you don't necessarily always see right away from young quarterbacks. And, it's hard not to make the comparison to Garrett Grayson, but he's much better than I think Garrett Grayson ever has been, or ever was, during his time in training camp. And look, I think quarterback's just a position where you can either see it or you don't, and it doesn't take a long time to see if there's at least some of it. And I think that Book definitely has some of it. I hope he plays well in the preseason so that people can see that, the stuff we're seeing in training camp. Otherwise, it's just going to be folklore and we're all idiots. But I mean, look, this guy, he's really looked good. I think that there's a chance for him to be a very good NFL backup. I don't know if I see, a starter at this point. It's really early. He could develop and everything, but I think his start to this camp has been really good, and I think there is a lot of promise there.
Nick, Juwan Johnson was a name that we heard. Obviously, came in as a receiver, going to try some things at tight end. His name has flashed a couple of times. What's the latest with his role with the Saints?
Man, he looks awesome right now, and he's really starting to come on more and more as camp goes on. You see him settling into the tight end and getting better at it. I think the blocking is kind of the big barrier for him, but and again, it's not totally live at practice, even in pads, but the want to and the desire to block is there. You see him getting in the mix, which I think is a huge part of the battle, and you can build from there. So if he just becomes a decent enough blocker so that he gets covered like a tight end, I think that he's going to be good for this team. I actually think he's going to have a role this year. I'd be surprised if he isn't involved in the passing game quite a bit. They got a void there, kind of that wide tight end spot, and with Troutman, he can do a little bit of both. But I think there's definitely a spot for Johnson to do a lot on this team. I mean, man, he had 3 touchdowns yesterday, and they hit him on some of these bootleg plays. He's just able to create mismatches, and with the way this offense is without a lot of weapons right now, I really do think early in the season that there's a place for him to make some plays and get on the field.
All right, Nick, I really apologize because I know we kept you so long, but obviously we have to ask about Jameis Watts real quick as we close out. I feel like, anecdotally, I'm reading that Jameis is maybe taking a slight edge. Is this accurate? And if it is, at what point do we start to see the reps start to reflect that? How does Jameis finish this fight?
So if Jameis goes out there today and has a good day and he's the first quarterback in this camp to string together 2 good days in a row, I mean, I would be all in on it right now. If you lay out every practice, I think Jameis probably has the best 3 or 4 out of both guys, but it's so up and down. You know, in part of that's probably due to the rotation: 2 days with the first team, 2 days with the second team, 2 days with the first team. So there isn't as much rhythm being built. But you know, the drawback is, you know, the last time Jameis had a good day, he was like 9 of 10 in practice. Then he comes out and it's like 5 of 8 interception, and it just looks, you know, a little bit sloppy. I mean, the momentum doesn't carry over. So yesterday, I thought was possibly his second best practice. He had a red zone period that was just absolutely elite. I mean, just the passes he was hitting, the poise, all of it looked just outstanding. So yeah, I mean, gun to the head, if I had to pick one today, it would be Jameis. By the end of this practice, it might be back to even. I mean, I think that's how close it is.
Okay.
Going into the preseason games, I think they're probably going to take turns starting games. I wouldn't be surprised if Taysom gets the first one, but just because he started camp is the number one guy, and then Jameis gets the second one. You know, so I think they're going to go through these games, and it's that close to where, I don't know if you pick one at this point or start tailoring anything. I think you kind of go as you are, go through the first 2 games, evaluate it, and then see where you're at going into the third one. But it is that close. I think Jameis is a little bit better, but it's not far enough yet to where you say, you know, this is the guy.
Nick Underhill, at Nick_Underhill. Sign up for New Orleans Football, y'all. When you do, not only do you get your money's worth with the best Saints inside information, but the money doesn't go to any corporate overloads. It goes right to helping Nick do this excellent journalism. Nick, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, have a good one, guys.
For real, sign up. Okay. There's like, why do you think I read a lot of Saints stuff? Okay, and I love a lot of different writers, but the man who I'm constantly referencing is Nick a lot of times for a reason.
Those salary cap numbers that he threw out there just on a hypothetical Michael Thomas question.
Yeah, he's locked in.
He's impressive.
Locked in. Also, it's kind of scary to think that we're starting to trend to Antonio Brown sort of trajectory right now. Like, how did we get here? Right? I thought Mike Thomas was the great justification for paying your receivers if they play well. I mean, he got the bag, and then he had the best season of all time, and then it's just been one thing after another since then.
And you don't, like right now, you would like a quarterback, like a leader, to be like, hey, Mike, we need you. Here's the deal. Here's the situation. Let's work this out. But they're in a battle.
Yeah.
Like the quarterbacks right now, they're in a battle. So every second of their day is geared towards winning that job and being the leader of the team. You said it yesterday. If Drew's there, what's that situation look like? Is it at this point?
I don't know. We shall see.
Don't feel great, Bob.
No, it's going to be so crazy if Mike Thomas is traded. It's still hard for me to even get there mentally, but who knows? How about the little insight into the Thomas Morstead laces thing? Yeah. Laces out, Tom. The hell's going on, dude?
You know?
Yeah, come on, dude. You got our boy Lutz looking mortal last year.
That's a bad feeling. It's a bad feeling when you're holding and you don't give him the oof.
Your hands are too big to hold. How's that possible?
I help.
Oh, wow. Okay, I thought they'd just be distracted for the kicker. They couldn't see the ball. They'd just be like flying blind, like Luke in the trench shot. All right,
one of my most nerve-wracking times of my life is I had to hold for Nate Kading in a training camp practice in the NFL. And I was like, if you screw this up, they might cut you on the spot.
And you did it? You pulled it off?
It was good
enough. Did you make the kick?
Nate's like, could have been better, but Nate made it.
The laces were out?
The laces were perfect.
Okay. That's because
I leaned it a little too much, though, he said. I leaned it a little too much.
All right, when we get back here at OTB, more NFL talk. Keep it locked.